If the narrative setting of my games is what soothes my soul, then the challenge of a clean, well-executed abstract game is in turn where I look to sharpen my mind. The number and quality of such games now available in the market is truly staggering, and we hope to bring you some of the best of these games in review format over the coming year. Appropriate then that we should start with Onitama, a game well regarded for its purity of form and surely an exemplar of this category of game. Somewhere in ancient Japan, two masters of martial arts meet alongside their most promising students to test their skill. Here, before the shrine of Onitama, they may achieve enlightenment and prove the superiority of their fighting styles, surrounded by animal spirits who whisper guidance to the combatants. Yeah, it's a thin sort of storyline, just enough to give a taste of the game's theme, but to be honest, Onitama needs its flavor text about as much as the game of chess needs to be adapted into a trilogy of novels. And for lovers of more traditional board games such as chess, the components of this game may feel familiar. The game takes place across a 5x5 square board, with each player's pawns set up across opposite board edges. The only difference between these pieces is the master pawn, taller than the student pawns, which is placed in the central square on the player's own board edge, known as their temple arch space. Each player is dealt 2 cards from a deck of 16 possible movement cards, each of which is aligned to the player's own table edge, and therefore provides a visual representation of the possible legal moves that can be applied to one of the player's pieces in their next turn. A 5th movement card is drawn, the colour of which will determine who makes the first move, and this is placed to the side of the board. The remaining movement cards will not be used, making each round feel unique as a different combination of moves and therefore different strategies will be available each time a new game is played. During each of their turns, a player will select one of the cards in front of them along with any one of their pawns and move the pawn to any of the spaces permitted by the card. For example, by aligning the rabbit card's black square with this pawn, we can see that any of the spaces denoted by the coloured squares on the card are permitted moves, but we could also apply it to the pawn next to them and move that pawn to any of these squares instead. Your pawns cannot leave the 5x5 grid or occupy a space already occupied by one of your other pieces. However, if you move one of your pawns on top of one of those belonging to your opponent, their pawn is captured and removed from the game. You must always make a move if it is possible to do so, meaning that it is entirely possible for your opponent to maneuver themselves in such a way as to force you to make a disadvantageous move, a danger further increased as you start to lose student pawns, eroding the number of possible moves you can make. Additionally, once you have used one of your cards to make your move, you must swap it with the 5th card at the side of the board, and your opponent will swap this card for the card they use in their own turn. With available moves always cycling, and your opponent always able to make use of the cards you have previously discarded, your strategy will need to be adaptive. There are 2 ways to win Onitama: either move your master pawn across the board to the temple arch of your opponent, or alternatively capture their master pawn. The rules are genuinely as simple as that, and it's in the application of these basic rules through gameplay that Onitama achieves its brilliance. I always look forward to getting Onitama off the shelf and playing a few rounds. I must admit I get a small tingle of joy just setting up this game. Opening the magnetic box feels like opening an ancient calligraphy set, whilst unfurling the neoprene mat and arranging the pieces is evocative of the one-on-one duel that the game represents. There's nothing particularly high detail about the pawns themselves, nor does there really need to be, but I can easily imagine fans of this game replacing the plastic with smooth pebbles or marble chess pieces or similar to elevate what is already a very aesthetically pleasing, if minimalist, game. You can comfortably complete a game of Onitama in half an hour, often less, making it a great game for when you have limited time and creating the opportunity to play multiple games in a session. I absolutely recommend that you do so. Onitama simply isn't a play once and pack away kind of game. Players benefit from warm-up time and the ability to play around with different card combinations. As for player suitability, Onitama works harder than most games to equalise its opponents and boil its gameplay down to raw skill. As anyone that has ever tried to teach such a game to a child knows, there is a lot of inside information in traditional games like chess in terms of potential moves of the wide variety of pieces that make it a difficult game to simply pick up and play for the first time. In Onitama, all the possible moves, both present and over the next turn or two, are easily visible. The cards are even oriented for the player's individual perspectives. As the patterns of movement available are dictated by the cards rather than the rules applicable to individual game pieces, and all the information is open to both players, the game is easy to explain and quick to learn at a functional level. As a result, Onitama is open to pretty much any type of gamer, from children to pensioners, regardless of background or experience. The depth of Onitama will appeal to long-time gamers, but Onitama is also an ideal introduction to non-traditional board games for more casual gamers. In fact, Onitama would be the kind of balanced game that any two players could pick up and enjoy, were it not for the one component of the game the creators of Onitama cannot control: the players themselves. If my experience of this game is anything to go by, these kinds of abstract games represent a different challenge for different people. Play Onitama against the wrong opponent, and one of you is going to be rapidly and repeatedly left in the dust of defeat. Some players simply can't visualise potential moves as well as others, at least not to start with, and when it comes down to it, this is Onitama's entire premise. Worse, if one player is struggling with Onitama and taking longer to decide on a given move, this is just giving their opponent more time to plan their own and rule out possible counter-strategies. A few quick ripostes later, and a weaker player can feel completely out of their depth. As is so often the case in life, the greatest strength of Onitama, its elegance, is also its greatest drawback. There isn't enough substance to Onitama's theme or story, or enough opportunity for lucky twists and turns in games where opponents are badly matched, for the losing player to derive much joy from the experience. And conversely, not much joy to be derived from repeatedly thrashing a player who simply can't wrap their head around the game. At which point there's a real danger that both players give up without giving this game its due. I'd like to be able to recommend some gaming etiquette stronger players can use to encourage weaker players, but other than introducing a handicap by reducing the number of student pawns on one side, or backseat driving your opponent, which have the potential to be insulting or infuriating for the recipient, it's difficult to see what this could be. I'd welcome your thoughts in the comments if you have ideas, as I have a number of gamer friends for which this has become an issue. Is this a design flaw? I don't think so. But with so many board games based on luck mechanics, the roll of a dice or the draw of a card, I think many of us are used to thinking about balance in board games as something that has to be achieved mechanically by the publisher, rather than something that is affected by our choice of participants. Just as a race between the fastest human alive and me would be extremely unsatisfying, a mismatch of players in Onitama has the potential to be also. It seems to me that it's a simple courtesy, if you're the player advocating this game to your friends, that you give some consideration as to how you ensure your opponent has a positive first experience of the game. Alternatively, if you're considering adding this game to your collection for the first time, I cannot recommend it enough, but you may wish to borrow a copy from a friend or try it out at your local board game club and consider who your regular opponents are likely to be prior to committing to it as a purchase. For some players, Onitama will represent the ultimate brain teaser, and no amount of defeats will stop them trying to solve this puzzle. If you're such an individual, you will find much to love in Onitama. Alternatively, if you can find a sparring partner with whom you share a similar aptitude, positive or negative, for the game, then Onitama feels like the ultimate duel, unfettered by thematic or narrative distractions. The best games of Onitama are tense, close affairs that encourage players to think several moves ahead, to be aware of the unique combinations of moves the 5 cards in play may facilitate. Ironically, considering Onitama's martial arts theme, the pleasure of this game is that of locking your wits against another human being, thinking your way out of difficult positions, and the satisfaction of capturing an opponent who through your sheer brain power has been left with no escape. Furthermore, and I cannot stress this enough, persistence at Onitama will be rewarded. The more you play Onitama, the more your skills will develop. You'll start to recognise patterns of cards that make certain types of movement more rare, or become quicker at considering all possible moves on the board. With sufficient practice, motivation and discipline, anyone can be good at this game, and that is to its credit. Onitama is a perfect blossom, a true master of the abstract game genre, so you may be wondering why it needs the multiple game expansions that are available on the market. To be honest, we're a little curious about that as well. If you'd like us to play these expansions and provide follow-up reviews on them to help you decide whether to add them to your games, let us know in the comments and we'll add it to our production schedule. While you're at it, do let us know if you found this video helpful. Perhaps drop us a like if you did, and consider subscribing. We've got a huge year ahead, and we're determined to make Nameless Seraphim Gaming a channel you just can't do without when it comes to getting your fix of reviews, commentary, painting and gameplay videos. It would be truly wonderful if you would come along for the ride. Until our paths towards enlightenment cross once more, remember to work hard, play better, and take care out there.